This is Brother Ron, and welcome to We All Be News Radio and TV, the news-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Hello, Judge. Are you there?
Yes, sir.
All right, excellent. We All Be is under him on, once again, the one and only, the Honorable Judge Joe Brown. He got the word about what's going down, not only in your town, but all around the world. How you doing tonight, sir?
All right, young man. I'm doing fine.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad to hear that, man. I know you've been pretty busy. You've been a person in demand, and people always ask me on the streets, what Judge think about what's going on with this? I mean, your wisdom is sought out there, and it's very much appreciated by your fans and your growing fan base online. But I want to ask you about a couple of things. I know we talked early in August, but now it's September the 1st. And I got to get your thoughts about the legacy and the man known as the late Senator John McCain. What are your thoughts about him?
Well, he had a long legacy he had to build on. He didn't embarrass it. He became a U.S. Senator, but his daddy was an admiral of some note in the U.S. Navy. McCain did his share of personal heroics. Some wanted to get on him about his performance as a POW, but what they put people through these days isn't what used to be the case. He said it well. The U.S. should not be about torture, because if you torture, then you might get your own people tortured that way. I noted some Korean War vets who advised me that when they were prisoners with the communists, they got a lot of slack because they were told Americans did not torture prisoners. Now, somewhere between what happened in 1951, 2, and 3, and what the CIA and other entities did between there and the middle of the Vietnam situation, sort of destroyed that, so they did get jacked around when they were held in detention. So just remember, what goes around comes around. So it's a good idea, considering how bad war can be, to add a little bit of maneuverability to it when it comes to treatment of inmates and prisoners. We have done pretty well with our system of due process and the law, and sometimes it's discouraging when bozos who claim to be in the know think that we should abandon due process in terms of something expedited for the expedience of the moment. It doesn't work too well. McCain, as a legislator, was not one of the worst. Some people wanted to hold it against him that he didn't want the holiday made into what it was. Well, let's be frank, there were a lot of black folk, particularly young ones back in the 60s and 70s, who were what were then known as militants, who didn't think so either, but it is what it is. I'd be willing to forgive him a lot because he's got black family members. And by that, I mean he's got black grandchildren, at least as they meet the definition of black. They look more black than Obama does, let alone his kids. So your legacy gets extended to your grandchildren, and there's something special to you. You know that if you've ever had any, or you have contemplated having any. And McCain had a black daughter-in-law. She was a naval officer who met her son in the Navy, and they got married, so she never got mistreated by the McCain family. I say, there you go. McCain was somebody that stepped up to the plate for his set of circumstances. So I can't hold that against him.
But do you feel like, as far as being a POW, did he get people killed by revealing certain sensitive information?
No, that war was so goddamn clumsy the way they ran it. There is a guy named Clausewitz.
Okay.
He's a Prussian general. He wrote a book whose German name is Vom Krieg. It means in English translation, On War. And he sort of synthesized what war was all about, and he noted specifically, he said, war is but the ultimate extension of the political process. He said, and whether or not you win the war on the battlefield, if it's so unpopular or at home that you wind up getting turned out of office, then you have been defeated. You need to keep all of these things in consideration, and unless you are compelled to fight a defensive war, you should think strongly about resolving any situation with diplomacy before you get to war, since war is but the ultimate extension of the political process. It was dead right, and according to Clausewitz, we were going to lose that war anyway. There was no way to win it because essentially the only way the U.S. could have won was to have flattened the whole country, and that would have defeated our purposes. So there was no plausible purpose other than ego for being in the doggone thing. I think Johnson was in over his head, and he got misled by some of his generals.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, they were still trying to fight a situation centered on Europe rather than in Southeast Asia. Another thing was that I don't think that the powers that be, let alone the American public, understood the hornet's nest they were getting into. At the time, the United States had 198 million people. Vietnam's total population was somewhere between 130 and 140 million people. To give you an idea and a perspective about that, Nazi Germany was only somewhere between 40 and 60 million people, depending upon how you counted it. And it took roughly 12 million men in American uniforms plus 9 million in Russian uniform to subdue the Nazis. So 500,000, 500,000 wasn't going to do it for 130 to 140 million when it took almost 20 some million to subdue 40 to 60 million. The numbers just weren't there.
Okay, well, I ask you this then. I'm thinking about myself when you said about McCain and about his situation as POW. What if John McCain was a black man from the Mississippi Delta with no type of connections, like a father who was an admiral or had, connections to the White House? What would have happened to him based on the things that people accused John McCain of doing while in prison? Would he have been court-martialed or executed?
No, probably not much. If his father hadn't been an admiral, nobody would have paid much attention to him, and he certainly wouldn't have been executed. He wasn't the only prisoner of war, POW, who did what he did. And then you have to give him this consideration. He refused to get furloughed or released early until they released everybody after the war was essentially wound down. You've got an individual here in Memphis who had a comparable situation that occurred some years earlier. He was black. He defected to the Chinese, to the communists, when he was a prisoner of war in Korea, and he became Mao Zedong's principal personal advisor on the black problem in America. He wound up getting 6 degrees from the University of Beijing, and his mother got ill, and he came back. He got tried for treason. He got acquitted. And he set up an Oriental food place here for the benefit of those people who actually were from China. And he married the daughter of a deposed Chinese warlord. He died peacefully a few years ago. His name, we know him as Skip, but he was cool, and he had a Chinese place, and the real Chinese would eat there when they visited the area.
Oh, interesting. That's a hell of a story right there. That should be a movie.
Yeah, it should be.
Is his relatives still around? Do you have any children or grandchildren?
Yeah, he's got several children.
What happened to the business? Is it still open or still running?
It's been sold.
Okay. But I was just talking to somebody about it.
Several actually, but they
Okay.
were sold.
I was just talking to some people the other day. I said, when will black folks start owning like Chinese and Mexican restaurants? It's like all the Chinese people own soul food restaurants when they come here, and they're very popular among black people.
Chinese restaurants and the real Chinese diplomats and consulate, when they came through here, that's where they ate.
So that's interesting. That's a story that needs to be known. I mean, that's an incredible story, actually. I was thinking about Robert F. Williams too. I mean, was he there at the same time Robert F. Williams was there with his wife Mabel?
Well, this was back in the early 50s.
Okay. Oh, the early 50s. Okay.
So he stayed in China until the Cultural Revolution was over, and then he came back to America when his mother was sick, and he submitted to trial, but he was acquitted. So he ran a Chinese food business. He ran several.
Do you think he was utilized by the U.S. intelligence authorities to get intel about China?
No, they got upset because he wouldn't say too much.
Oh, really? And they allowed him to come back with him. Okay, wow. Okay.
That's why they tried him for treason, but they couldn't get him found guilty.
Okay, let me ask you this then. Let me think about, you remember back in 2004 when John Kerry, who was people consider a war hero, and he protested against Vietnam once he came back. You remember the swift boat Veterans for Justice was launched against him?
Oh, that was so much nonsense. Mm-hmm. See, I'll give you this. If you are anywhere in the hot fire zone where you can get taken out by a mortar round, a stray bullet, an artillery round, or a rocket, you were there. Mm-hmm. If you're going out on regular patrols, you were there.
Mm.
So that's just carping by people who didn't like his politics.
And also, I was thinking about the Vietnam. Yes, sir.
Is the only one. You had A.L.L. Gore. He could have gone in as an officer, but he went in as a private.
Mm. Oh, that's
served the whole tour out there in the boonies.
What about George W. Bush, though? He got, 5 deferments or what?
Bush was a jerk. One thing about Bush, see, you know all that whole flim-flam about him being A.W.O.L. from the Texas Air National Guard?
Right.
What it was about is they started having such a problem with drugs that they made everybody on flight crew status take a P test once a week. He stayed A.W.O.L. because he couldn't have passed it. He was a junkie. He did coke and the herb. See, he was a drunk. He did cocaine and he did herb. And if you go up to where Yale is located, and you take the town tour and you look at the entry book for the police department, you'll see all these times they busted George W. for public drunk and disorderly.
Wow.
He couldn't get a date according to his frat brothers, and his mama had to get him dates, and half the time they had to go rescue the date when George W. was passed out drunk.
And was he
Bill Clinton were in the same fraternity, but it was not this other one that George W. was in with his daddy, known as Skull and Bones.
Okay.
Bill Clinton wasn't in that
one. And also, was George W. a cheerleader at Yale? Was he a football cheerleader or something like that?
Cheerleader at Andover.
Okay, because people talk about these.
They called Andover bend over. And accordingly, he got embarrassed many times when his mama Barbara would take her shoes off and get down on the field and start helping the cheerleaders squad lead cheers in her bare feet.
Wow. That George W. was a regular old Harry Truman, it seems like.
Well, he was a clown. He used to sit in class and chew tobacco and spit in a paper cup. Everybody thought it was nasty as hell, and they all thought he was an ignorant fool with the nonsense he had spouted that was totally off point. He thought Catcher in the Rye was a communist plot.
Mm. So, I mean, I used to think that Jeb was the smarter Bush son, but I guess
he was.
What happened?
See, George W. got in on a legacy. And a year after he was admitted on the legacy of his daddy, they stopped it. And you had to get in on grades and aptitude tests. See, George Herbert Walker went into the military directly out of high school. And as a matter of fact, he has an interesting, unique distinction in the whole military apparatus of World War II. Okay. He was quite literally the youngest pilot in the U.S. military, combat pilot in the U.S. military. He was a naval pilot. He got shot down in a TBF torpedo plane, and perhaps unfortunately for the country, he almost got captured. If he had been captured, it was at a place called Iwo Jima, I-T-O, not Iwo. Okay. And the commandant there was a little sadist. He used to take the American pilots, kill them, and barbecue their livers, and they would have a party with sake and barbecued liver. Wow. He just barely managed to not get swept in by the tides on this rubber raft he was on, and wound up getting picked up some days later and rescued. Otherwise, we would have had a footnote. He was a barbecue menu item rather than the president. He wasn't a very good one, but he was sensible enough not to totally depose Hussein and leave a power vacuum like this idiot son of his did.
Yeah, but he produced that idiot son. That's what I'm saying.
Well, they didn't like him in the family.
But maybe we would have been better off if he did get, barbecued. I'm just joking.
So what I'm saying. Jeb was supposed to be the one, and the family looked at George Wacko, as ruining it for Jeb. I know that the word was that George Herbert Walker Bush had to buy off a number of young ladies that George W. got knocked up when he wasn't whacked out drunk. Wow. I mean, he did a whole lot of crazy stuff according to the police blotter up there where Yale is. Now, see, his father, George W., aside from being the youngest combat pilot in the American military in World War II, got back out, went to school at Yale. After he got out, he was captain of the football team, captain of the baseball team, and he got his 4-year college degree in just 2 years and graduated summa cum laude. Okay. And was Phi Beta Kappa. That was George Herbert Walker Bush, not his dumb George W. Bush. Now, the L.A. Times reported his GPA and SAT when he got in, and the SAT wasn't that high, and he had a 1.7 grade average, which was a D grade average to get in Yale on a legacy thing.
Man, what if George W. Bush was a black dude with those type of credentials?
He wouldn't have got past Yale.
He wouldn't have been president. He would have been a lot of things. Wow, that's amazing. So white privilege is real.
Right. He's a real clown.
Wow.
See, this is interesting.
Okay.
George W.'s grandfather, George Herbert Walker Bush's father, was Prescott Bush. Prescott Bush had been United States Senator from Massachusetts, and when he retired, John F. Kennedy got his seat.
You sure that wasn't Connecticut and it was Herbert Lodge that Kennedy got seat from, Lodge guy?
That was Massachusetts. It was Prescott Bush. Now, the other thing about Prescott Bush, even though he was a Republican, he backed up and encouraged Harry Truman to sign Executive Bill 1981 that integrated the armed services. See, they were discussing that, and white generals were saying black folk were incompetent. But there is an anecdotal story that says, as Commander-in-Chief, Truman was looking at the report for Red Flag, which was the fighter competition that the U.S. Army Air Corps had 1946, 1947, and then again in 1948. And he noted that the black folk from the Tuskegee Airmen, the 332nd, won it in 1946, and he had just gotten an announcement that they had won again in 1947 while these generals were telling them that they were incompetent to do stuff like fly fighter planes. He'd also gotten the advisement that they weren't allowed to receive their trophies in the Reno hotel or casino where the celebration was to be held. Now, as a result of that, Truman took the risky step for a white politician of being the first U.S. president ever to address the NAACP.
Mm-hmm.
And he made a famous speech that got later suppressed, and he said he could see no earthly reason why Negro Americans should not and could not and would not be treated the same as white ones when it came to politics, residences, and everything else. So he signed 1981, Executive Order 1981, and Prescott Bush encouraged him. Another thing, Prescott Bush backed up Eisenhower when he took on that rabid clown, Joe McCarthy, who was going around, who was running around trying to make everybody a commie. Another thing, too, when King was getting bailed out of jail during the Civil Rights era, it developed that Prescott Bush was basically the surety on every bond that needed one. So he was from Massachusetts. George Herbert Walker Bush had relocated to Texas to deal with energy. Now, the the uncle to George Herbert Walker Bush was George Herbert Walker. In 1946 and 47, George Herbert Walker chartered Halliburton in Oklahoma. Halliburton had been chartered in 1919 and then allowed to go defunct, but George Herbert Walker rechartered it in 1946, and Halliburton was about energy. So George Herbert Walker Bush, his nephew, made a lot of money by listening to the advice of Uncle Herbie and buying up the mineral rights of property holders who had holdings that surrounded what became oil strikes. So they'd go in and pay cash for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25% of the mineral rights and then start hitting it big within a year or two. George Herbert Walker Bush founded Zapata Oil Company to handle that. Now, interestingly enough, the Walker Bush family had a holding company to handle all of their enterprises, and it was known as Zapata Offshore Oil Inc. And believe it or not, it was chartered in Kuwait. Now, there might be a coincidence or it might be the cause, but when the U.S. got involved in the Iraq-Iran-Kuwait situation in 1990, or rather the Iraq-Kuwait situation, it just so happens that when Hussein had invaded Kuwait and nationalized everything, that nationalized the Bush family fortune, so they were destitute until they went in and took Kuwait back. Kuwait had been separated off in 1922 from Iraq so the Royal Navy could get oil. The British government bought 51% of a company known as Anglo-Persian Oil, which is now BP, so they could exploit the oil resources, and sent the Royal Marines in and split off Kuwait. There were the shenanigans on that. You've heard of this Lawrence of Arabia. They did a movie.
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking about that when you said that. Yes, sir.
Well, his task was to go find some place that they could annex for oil, and that was Kuwait.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an interesting hookup. And then you get rabidly right-wing George W. Bush, who was just an irresponsible, dumb jerk, who might have been cunningly brilliant to set the Bush family up to move to a different level of wealth. The Bush family started in enterprise when a great-grandfather started up an iron foundry in Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
And then after World War I, that Bush had become identified by Carnegie and Rockefeller, and they bought up a lot of the German war-making industry after World War I and consolidated it and appointed that Bush to be head of the corporate holding company that managed them. So all through the 20s, 30s, and World War II, that Bush was getting a check from the Nazi Germans who were depending upon that war industry to make their tank engines and a few other things. The Bush family had been into what they call paper entrepreneurialism. That is, instead of running a company, you buy the company up and sell off its assets for gain. You were into international information, read I Spy stuff, and into energy development. That's what the Bush family's been into for more than 100 years. Now, when the Gulf War II started, it developed that France, Russia, the U.S., and some others were attempting to influence Hussein into having him sign a contract to let Halliburton exploit the Iraqi oil. He did not do that. He signed a contract with the French and the Russians. So there is a plausible theory that we got involved with all this sham about weapons of mass destruction to give us bogus justification for going in there so Halliburton could exploit the oil. Now, they wound up exploiting the oil resources of Kuwait. They got the position without bid at the end of the fracas in 2007 and 8. And the last I checked 10 years ago, Halliburton was netting $2.3 million every 7 hours over there. So that may have been a brilliant cunning effort to set up a fortune for the family. Also, the thing about Afghanistan, you notice we invaded Afghanistan in 2001, not 2003, under the pretext that Al-Qaeda was over there. But it's interesting to note that Halliburton had been attempting to get pipeline rights, understanding Halliburton is actually a Bush family enterprise. Now, George Walker Bush signed an executive order in May 2001 giving the Taliban $45 million in military aid, principally night vision devices, which came back and haunted them. That was in May 2001. That was before September 9/11. But coincidence, this something that, of course, the press overlooked because it wasn't salacious enough. They'll cover somebody giving a head job or having a little sexual escapade, but they won't cover anything like that. Anyway, that's a long about connection between the Bushes and what happened. We get away from McCain, but McCain was not a bad character as far as Republicans go, and a lot of Democrats in Arizona supported him over your typical run-of-the-mill Democratic offering, who basically was about who pees in what bathroom rather than actually doing anything worthwhile.
Yeah, I liked John McCain back in 2000 in terms of his Straight Talk Express when he was running for president. I thought George W. Bush did him wrong in South Carolina primary. But since that time, I don't know. I don't think he really was a maverick to me. Where is his landmark legislation that speaks of his maverick? You know, what did he get done in 30 years plus as a senator?
Well, see, you have to understand, before you can come up with landmark legislation, you have to be head of somebody's committee.
Okay.
And if you have a position that's too unpopular with the power, the party in power, and that's your party, you're not going to get those positions. He didn't do badly in what he did support. And I think the Republicans, I predict, are going to make him a scapegoat behind affordable health care. But you have to understand, I don't think they're really going to do too much to affordable health care because we think of it as Obamacare, but actually it was senior Republican U.S. Senator from the state of Tennessee, Dr. Bill Frist, who, when he was Republican Senate Majority Leader, drafted Affordable Care. And basically the primary beneficiaries to what is known as Obamacare are those insurance companies and HMOs that his family founded. See, they founded Blue Cross, Blue Shield, etc. So they're making a killing off of it.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't get that reported by the press.
My thing is, well, I think it's kind of weird that people are full of crap. The same folks that believe in Santa Claus and Tooth Fairies are the same ones that act like George W. Bush didn't commit these crimes against humanity, where they want to just invite Donald Trump for funerals. But wasn't not George W. Bush with Afghanistan and 9/11 happened on his watch and the Iraqi war? What about these things, Katrina?
Well, yeah, but you see, here's the deal. Every president you have had recently has been a friend of LGBTQ.
Okay.
Hollywood, advertisement, and the news media have been about LGBTQ.
Mm-hmm.
Most of their executives and the membership thereof are the same thing. So Trump is an enemy of their program. So without them telling you that's why they attack him, and a lot of stuff they bring out about him is worse in the commission by several of the last few presidents, but they didn't bring that out.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't bring it out, and they just generally attack him. And because they attack him and wish to associate him with certain elements of society that we should hear about, we now hear about it, whereas they ignored it before.
Mm-hmm.
The press is famous and infamous for that. For example, they wanted to take this thing that sleaze Nancy Grace left us with, and that is the impression that O.J. killed Goldman and Nicole.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't. It was a piss poor case. And they ran with that, but what they did not cover was that 4 of the primary detectives had to wind up doing jail time for falsifying evidence to the extent that California had to release, I believe the number was 128 convicted felons from the California penitentiary for having been framed by 4 of the principal detectives on the O.J. case.
Was that the Ramparts thing? Was that Rampart?
Yeah, Rampart scandal. That's
mm-hmm.
exact. Now, wouldn't that have made a difference? 4 detectives intimately involved in the O.J. case go to jail for framing defendants and planting falsified evidence.
Oh, yes, sir. But like you said, the news don't care about that. They care about just sex and sex and sex.
Or that black man allegedly killed a white woman. Mm-hmm. Actually, the evidence is so overwhelmingly not in favor of O.J.'s guilt. It's just pathetic to see how they even screw their crazy brains around it, the way they report it. But that's because of sleazebag Nancy Grace. That was her first assignment, and she carried it off like she was there every day. When my sources, who were actually there, say she came in every evening asking what was going on and trying to throw money around to buy information.
So it's like she's doing like some gonzo reporting then, like, you know, they do.
Yeah, this sleaze tabloid reporting.
Mm.
She still does it. You can see it, but for some reason, America forgets that she was the source of all of those condemning stories on O.J. that were not founded on reality.
But with Hollywood, speaking of that, Hollywood has now made the narrative that O.J. did it. They come off these O.J. movies every so often and documentaries and whatnot. And so now they got the millennials thinking that O.J. did it. The younger folks don't know.
I saw all the evidence they had in the evidence room. Mm-hmm. footprints in the blood on the scene. One of them is by a size 9 shoe, and the other one's by a 10.5. And OJ wears 12, not 9 or 10.5. The glove, if it did not fit, you must have quit. He wore in that glove, according to the maker, a person named Richard Zucker wore a size XXL, and the glove was a size large, not XXL. And the person who wore that size glove and who found it was Furman. The whole thing about the bloody socks at the foot of the bed, well, Nancy Grace didn't sit in and look at it. And what she did not tell the public about, the public still doesn't know about, is that LAPD security squad took a video of the scene. At 9:14, you see the foot of the bed there, no socks. At about 9:20 something, you hear the people who are taking it, and there's audio on it, say, "Excuse me, who are you?" "Detective Furman, you'll have to leave the house." And not long after that, "Detective Furman, what are you doing in the bedroom?" And then they pan the camera up so you can see Furman standing right there at the foot of the bed, and them telling him he's got to leave the house. A while later, you see another video shot by Crime Scene about a half hour, 45 minutes later, and there where you saw no bloody socks at 1:14, there are bloody socks just where you saw Furman standing in the video when they told him he had to leave the house. See, nobody who grew up in L.A. would believe LAPD would tell the truth about anything.
Right.
So, was it a race card? No. Was it the fact that Nicole was a junkie who owed every big-time dealer in West Hollywood and in West L.A. a whole bunch of money? Was it the case that Goldman was just a little hanger-on and Nicole was known as a fag hag with good drugs and he was just over there incidentally to get high?
What about the Faye Resnick thing? I mean, I heard her folks was involved in organized crime. The Resnick were powerful organized crime people.
Well, Faye Resnick, not really.
Okay.
But what was involved was that two of Nicole's sisters were dating organized crime figures who were in the Federal Witness Protection Program, who, according to testimony elicited during a hearing at trial, believed the message was sent to them to be quiet.
Wow. So this is stuff that needs to be known, but like I said, people don't really...
Well, it was on TV. They covered it.
Yeah, but people got short memories. You know how people are.
No, but see, people didn't look at it. They relied on that sleazeball Nancy Grace to report. Like she said, the DNA evidence, I listened to it. She said, it's just overwhelming. There's no way OJ can overcome this. So I had taped every scrap of it in my chambers. I was the judge. So I listened to it that evening. And the expert who had taught the other two experts said, this isn't OJ's blood sample. It's from someone from similar background, but it does not exclude, I think the number was 96,000 other people in the LA County area. And interestingly enough, it would tend to indicate someone with northeastern Mediterranean extraction, or perhaps from the Isle of Sicily, which is interesting in terms of the organized crime figures in witness protection. See, they slit both throats from ear to ear and took pliers and pulled the tongues out of the incision after they had been stabbed one time with a fatal stab wound. And I have a personal friend who's called as an expert by the state. He said no one person did this. It was a two-man hit. Hell, look, you got the footprints and the blood. Then it came out in the trial that they had taken a sample of OJ's blood back and contaminated the scene with his blood sample, so the jury threw that out. But that didn't get covered. The Nancy Grace said overwhelming evidence against the defendant. What actually got testified to was the people that had operated the a towing facility for LAPD for 27 years, testified they went over the Bronco with a fine-tooth comb. When they towed it in, there wasn't a drop of blood in there. The vehicle was secured in a small facility with barbed wire at the top and 4 padlocks on it, with the keys possessed only by LAPD detectives. And when they were instructed to tow the car to the crime lab 11 days later and they got it out of the impound area, it was full of blood. So, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that for the defense. So they just made a false case. But that's no different than the false case they made against James Earl Ray for killing King, which he did not do.
Right.
See, they never should have accepted Ray's plea. The basis for accepting his plea was that they had a rifle that was supposedly the murder weapon. But clear as day in the report they had, the only one was the FBI could not match the rifle they got from Ray with being the murder weapon.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it was no basis for any case at all, and he never did confess.
That's the key to people miss. He never did confess.
Never did confess, and the judge should not have accepted the plea because there was no evidence that the FBI could discern to hook Ray's rifle up with being the murder weapon.
But the way they got him was because the state witness, who was not a great witness, was a drunk. And he lied about
witness was not a bad witness, was not a witness. The chief detective who said he was sent over there to get their statement found the 2 so-called witnesses to Ray being in the flop house so intoxicated he could not revive them and had to call 911 to get them transported to the emergency room, where they stayed in intensive care for several days because they were in an alcohol-induced coma. And both of them had approximately twice blood alcohol level to constitute a fatal dose of alcohol for a non-alcoholic.
Now, so this stuff is interesting because this is not the National Civil Rights Museum narrative does not include these type of things that you're talking about.
They changed it in the last 6 months, by the way.
Oh, they have. So what they're saying now?
Oh, they're saying this may be the rifle. However, there are opinions that it is not now. The other thing is whether the shot came from the flop house where the 2 witnesses had been fatally poisoned by alcohol. And if they had not been taken to the emergency room, they'd be dead. Next thing is the chief detective who got there 15 minutes after the killing said couldn't have been from the flop house because there was a tree growing between the Lorraine Motel and the window to the flop house bathroom. They came back an hour later, the tree had been cut down. It was laying there on the ground.
So you actually had, like in Dallas, you had some police or law officials that are trying to do their job, and you had other people running interference at a high level.
Nobody in law enforcement concluded that Ray did it. The conclusion of the Memphis Police Department's homicide squad was Ray was not the gunman. He wasn't even in town.
So why has this been suppressed? I don't. Who's running interference?
And if they hadn't had the inconvenience of having had me get involved with it, then I'll just take them for their word. They objected to me continuing on the case because they said I knew more about ballistics than their experts did. So bottom line was, as I looked at it, they not only did not prove a case, they were actually proving Ray had nothing to do with it. They actually exculpated him.
What I'm saying is, it's like the system is guilty of allowing this man to spend all that time in jail and then allow him to die.
Yeah, that's the problem. Why are the prosecutors prosecuting somebody that the Homicide Bureau says is not the killer?
So what that means, that what they say about is there a conspiracy to keep this? Is there an inside job to?
There was a conspiracy.
Okay.
What I ultimately came up with is there were 5 weapons that matched the specifics of what was necessary to have fired the fatal bullet. They were invoiced to the FBI in late December 1967. The Defense Department wanted them back, and in late April 1968, after they made repeated demands, the FBI conducted an inventory, and this particular one is missing. They claim they don't know what happened to it. That's the murder weapon.
So is the FBI guilty? Are they the government party
They
that's guilty?
supplied the weapon.
So that make them guilty, right? Well, you say they're guilty.
Yes, it does.
Okay. So why we can't tell that truth then? Like, we found them guilty in the court of law, right, back in December '99.
He did not get found guilty.
Okay.
He pled guilty under what they call an A.L.L plea, A.L.L, versus North Carolina. It stands for the principle that even if a person's not guilty, he may be allowed to plead guilty if, quote, he does so freely and voluntarily, understandingly, knowingly, advisedly, and intelligently, and the state otherwise has a reasonable factual basis upon which to continue the prosecution independently of the plea of guilty. Now, the only thing they had was the rifle, but then when you get into the record, it's clear that the FBI says they can't match the rifle up with being the murder weapon. So they had none. They should have never allowed his plea.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, with the civil trial, when the jury said that the government was complicit.
Yeah, they did.
And also in another civil trial, you think about Fred Hampton.
There was one civil trial, and they found another somebody was most likely the killer. What that was about was still confusion, because it's my opinion that they had 4, maybe 5 alternative scapegoats to blame. And they blamed the one that was not in Memphis because he was the most screwed up in terms of a petty criminal record.
So I was going to say, like, with, you look at, we had Fred Hampton Sr., the Black Panther in Chicago. He was killed by the police.
I don't even put all that in there.
But I was saying, like, they had a civil trial in '82 that found them guilty. The government was complicit in his death, too.
Yeah, I know. They were. But see, I don't put the Panther Party in there. I used to be the community liaison for the UCLA BSU. So I wound up becoming closely allied with the Panther Party. I recruited John Huggins, Bunchy Carter, Nathaniel Clark, Elaine Brown, and Geronimo Pratt to UCLA under a special program. I recruited them. We used to hang out and talk a lot together. I know what went down on that, and see, there's a whole lot of other nonsense about that is basically romantic fabrication and mythology. So I'm not worried about what happened with Fred Hampton. I have not looked at the record, and I won't speak on anything that I don't have any either investigative involvement in or knowledge of the record about.
But his bodyguard, his chief bodyguard, Wayne O'Neill, was an informant. And
well, they had, look, let me tell you something. One of the real problems with the 60s is that they had it going on. Everybody was galvanized and motivated to do the right thing. But somewhere around 68, 69, it started coming out that every other person that was a member was somehow or another connected with some special police investigative unit or the FBI. So you shouldn't make, and all of it, like Kwanzaa. I won't celebrate Kwanzaa. Because at the time we knew Ron Everett, a.k.a. Ron Karinga, a.k.a. the Maulana Ron Karinga. He was an informant for LAPD's SIS unit and the FBI, and he started Kwanzaa in Lamert Park right off of Crenshaw in 1966 so he could get black folk talking and find out more information to feed to the FBI and LAPD's SIS unit.
Judge, I hear you talk about this stuff. This is what I'm saying. This is my concern. Like with the John McCain whitewashing of his legacy right now, and then you telling me this stuff, but yet people still celebrate Kwanzaa. Like, you got all this information that's available. Sir?
You couldn't get me in 10 yards of a Kwanzaa celebration.
But our people don't, like, I'm just saying, like, you can Google this stuff, what you're saying, even the stuff we put out, what you're saying, the content that you produce about this. People can find this information themselves.
I was there, goddammit. I saw that sleazy son of a bitch do what he did.
Well, why won't our people listen?
I heard him. I got yanked in by the FBI over and over again. and interrogated on my verbatim statement, said I saw these SOBs take down shorthand.
Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is, like, what can we do to help better educate our people about the seriousness of what Karinga did to his own people?
Here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody associates it with Kwanzaa. So I mean Kwanzaa and Ron Karinga.
Okay.
Ron Everett.
Mm-hmm.
When I first ran into Ron Everett, he had a fake Jamaican accent. He was student body president at L.A. City College.
Okay.
All right. Then he got into that. Well, there's much that the black man needs to know. How Smith's not at all necessary for you to wear your head because my line will teach you. You know, and he had been talking, my brothers, that is the thing which we must need to do, you know, when I first ran into him.
Wow.
Okay. So it is what it is. So the question is do you leave a myth going and get some people galvanized to do something off of black pride, or do you let them have the reality? You know, that's like you got a kid. Do you tell him what the reality is with Santa Claus, or you just let him be happy in his or her ignorance?
Well, you could make the case about the Jesus figure. I mean, that's another story, but...
Well, I'll make a case with that, too.
Okay.
And frankly, I'll say this. I know it offends a lot of people.
It is what it is.
As much as white folk and black folk have been praying to that entity and the results that white folk have gotten, we need to find something else.
Yeah, I hear you, Judge. I hear you. Because you know what, interesting, Judge, I went down to Birmingham a couple years ago to the 16th Street Baptist Church where them 4 little girls were killed. And you know, the dynamite that those white folks put in their church was so powerful, they blew up a stained glass image of a white Jesus. And them black folks, just after that happened, they put up another white stained glass Jesus. A white Jesus in stained glass. They took,
isn't it funny?
But it took white folks from England and Wales to raise money and put a black Jesus in stained glass in their church.
Y'all, isn't it funny?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's funny, like in a sad way.
It's like, okay, man. You know, like you white folk, they picked up Christianity because they compared it to the old pagan gods, and they got convinced that this Jesus something or another was stronger, so they switched over.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we do that same kind of comparison? What have we gotten out of it compared to what the white folks gotten out of it? You praying to be delivered from slavery, and they're praying to keep their slaves peaceful.
Who won?
What is Douglas said? He prayed for years and years to be delivered from slavery, so he decided to let his legs do the praying and walked away from slavery.
That's right. That's right. He knew it was a choice.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I'm not gonna come between somebody and their necessary metaphysics and religion or whatever. Some folks need it, but
why? But Judge, my thing about I don't go to church on a regular, and the reason why because like people are too emotional. They don't want to think with logic, like how a lot of us treat our politics. We get emotional about it instead of being objective and strategic about it, and we get blinded by emotions. I mean, I see a lot of men in church. They kind of effeminate to me. They kind of weak, you know. They kind of weak, but they get all the women though. They get all the women, but they kind of effeminate to me. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, and you got those other very effeminate types prancing around up on right next to the pulpit, and according to the religion, they're an abomination.
I mean, it's a strange place to be, man. It's a strange place.
It's like, okay, you know, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Hindu, Zen Buddhism, you know, Zoroastrianism, you name it.
Right.
If it makes you feel good, makes you float your boats, you know, go for it. Akinwale, Akofi, and the Goondi, you know, Baron Samdi.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who's Baron Samdi? We'll go down there to Jamaica, to Haiti, to the Caribbean, ask who Baron Samdi is, and then ask who the Obey man is, and they'll tell you. But it is what it is.
I know I talked to some people from the Baja faith. They say they respect all the religions. The Baja faith people,
Yeah, there's Baja, Rick, and it's what it is. If you need it, go for it. But
But what if your religion is hindering from you from living a complete and full life? I mean, why are you afraid of death if you believe in heaven?
well, yeah, that's part of the problem. So many people got a screwed up life; they're scared to die.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have a really full life, it doesn't make any difference. Hell, after a while, you just say, "I'm tired. I don't feel like being bothered anymore." Was this all it is? Hell, I had a good time. I ain't mad at it.
Yeah, but hey, speaking of that, I thought about what you said about Bill Clinton last time we spoke. Like, you respect a lot Bill Clinton, and I tell you this, I saw a little bit of the.
Let me tell you why I respect Clinton.
Okay.
Got nothing to do with him being president.
Mm-hmm.
Back 1980, 81, something like that. Maybe 82. I got asked to participate in this situation with some voting rights down in Arkansas. So we go to this synagogue for the meetings, and they have these Klansmen and white nationalists outside riding around in flatbed trucks, Klan paraphernalia, Confederate flags, Nazi swastikas and stuff, and they're bad-mouthing everybody and intimidating people.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody said, why don't we call the young governor in? So they called in young Clinton. Clinton showed up at the next meeting with he's buffed out then, big dude, 6'5", 6'6". So he was there, and all these folk over there cussing, and one somebody had a loud, he was being very vulgar. So Clinton asked this preacher to hold his coat. I walked over, and preacher walked over, and Clinton snatched this dude by the collar.
Wow. Okay.
This big dude yanked him up off the ground, rammed him up against the wall, riffled through his pocket, pulled his wallet out, flipped through it till he got to his license, looked at it, stuffed it back in his pocket. He had memorized it that quickly, and told the man where he lived, what his driver's license number was, and said he was coming by to kick his ass if anybody was out there messing with his constituents. He backhanded the dude, snatched the shotgun out of somebody's hand, butt stroked him with it, and walked down the sidewalk, knocked 2 or 3 people completely out. I said,
this is Bill Clinton as a governor of Arkansas did this?
Yeah, governor. I said, go ahead, dude.
Man, he's like an action hero, man. You sure that's Bill Clinton you talking about?
I got your back. So I ain't never had a problem with a man, even if he's on the other side.
Wow. Bill Clinton did that as governor of Arkansas.
Yeah, it's been 36, 38
years.
It's
almost 40 years ago. But what I want to say about Bill Clinton, I'll give him his props. I saw what he said at Aretha Franklin's funeral, and I thought it was very powerful what he said. One thing, he's comfortable around black people. He's not afraid of black people.
He used to fuck enough black women.
I hear he got a black son that look like him. There's a guy that look like him in Arkansas. That is his son. You say he does?
LBJ.
Okay.
LBJ's half black son.
But I was
white one. One's born in 65 and the other was born in 66.
So you believe that Bill Clinton actually has a black son too? This guy that came out.
I would be surprised if it wasn't more than one. He used to get him some black nookies.
Yeah, because
I guess Hillary would polish it up after he got through.
Well, I'm saying this dude do look like him, this mulatto interracial guy. He does look like him. He's in Arkansas, so I hope they can straighten that out. But what I would say about Clinton is that he does the things that Obama does not do. Obama takes black people for granted. He could have showed up to Aretha's funeral and showed the John McCain funeral too, like Bill Clinton did.
Between Obama and Bill Clinton. I'm not talking about the sleazy wife of his. Obama got raised by an Indonesian, that's Asian oil magnate, who ran the death squads for his government. He was a stone cold killer.
That's very okay.
One of the richest men on the planet Earth. And that's the background Obama got raised in.
Hillary
Clinton's daddy was a drunk, and his mama did the best she could. and he overcame a hell of a lot of adversity to get where he got. Obama didn't have to overcome crap worth of adversity as Barry Soetoro. He was just one of the richest kids on the planet Earth.
Mm.
And that's his background. He thinks white and thinks Indonesian. There is no black in him, except what he came up with opportunistically. When he was the U.S. Representative in the state of Illinois, when he became a U.S. Senator, he got graded by the Heritage Foundation as one of the A voting conservatives. They gave him an A for his conservative voting. Back in the U.S. Senate, there were only two other people they voted as more conservative, or they rated as more conservative. That's what you got. What you see ain't what you get.
Wow.
And he grew up in a network of spies. His daddy was a contractor for the CIA. The Soetoros and the Bush family are all friends.
And why do black folks still in love with this guy? I mean,
look for image.
God.
We don't go for reality. We go for image. I guess our reality was so crap poor that we just took whatever imagery we could come up with, no matter how ridiculous it was. And what kind of image you have of black folk? They always buck dancing or jumping up and down. They can play instruments, and everybody either stole their music or now they play it in the elevator.
Right. man. I don't want to judge. It's a fascinating time to be alive as a black person. It's like I don't get us a lot of times. Like, a lot of times, we don't respect each other. Like, you have a black boss. Like, I'll tell somebody, they say they feel sorry for homeless white people. I said, I don't feel sorry for homeless white people, because if they wanted to, they could clean themselves off and go into a place and get a job. Whereas you, as a educated black person, a black man, a lot of times they give you a hard time to do all type of background checks. But as a white person, you get away with that.
And see, I got a pet peeve. It's these damn brothers trying to front off like they all of a sudden got militant.
Right.
They want to talk about all the righteous brothers in the penitentiary and everything else. I say, look, man, these dudes are not in the penitentiary for playing Robin Hood.
Right.
They did not rob from the rich and give to the poor. They robbed their neighbors. They raped the neighbors' daughters or wives or girlfriends. They sold dope to their children. They shot up the neighborhoods and killed folk with stray bullets. They didn't do anything manly to protect the neighborhood. There's some vile, vicious folk. And what the hell? No, I ain't upset because they got jacked up by the crime control bill. Yes, it had a bad impact on us, but damn, we didn't have to make it so damn easy for it to have a bad impact on us.
That's true, too.
And like this crap, you let this little fat butt white girl from the Middle East, Kim Kardashian, talking about Mrs. Johnson. She was just starved for money. She sold one bag of dope. Yeah, and see what they didn't know. We talked about that. The amount of dope that witch went on trial for was 6,600 pounds of 95% pure coke. Ain't no 6 kilos, ain't no 6 bags. That's 3 and a half and a quarter, more than 3 and a quarter tons of 95% pure dope. So when you got that much coke involved, a whole lot of people are dying.
So the DOJ on Obama did the right thing by not giving her a pardon.
Yes, he did.
But Donald Trump, he's into image, and we all into image. Like you said, we more into
all
image.
All in the image. And where did your image come from? Some little Middle Eastern white girl with a big butt.
Right. Black man's kryptonite, it seems.
Yeah.
So somebody
how in the hell did Kim Kardashian become identified with black? Last 2 times I saw Jet magazine, they had Kim Kardashian and her big butt up in there.
Right.
Last 2 times I saw Ebony magazine, they got Kim Kardashian in there. What she got a connection with us for?
I mean, just I think black folks, we as a collective, we love white people that much. We are fascinated with white people.
Got a big old butt, so I guess we can claim it.
Right. It's so easy now to get it's crazy. It is insane right now. We are messed up collectively.
And then she becomes a political pundit. She and her husband, who know nothing about the subject. They become experts on prison reform.
Right. Well, why not try to advocate for somebody like a Mumia Abu-Jamal? Somebody like that.
They don't know who that is. Bottom line is, it's like you talking about political prisoners. See, the problem is in 1960s, you got H.Rap Brown,
right.
definitely political prisoner.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, Ron Karinga set him up to get busted.
I didn't know that. Wow.
I was being one of H.Rap Brown's bodyguards when that went down. And Karinga goons and Karinga personally intruded. And they gave him a carbine and then told the feds that he had transported the carbine and he had a pending case. That's what they busted him for. That's what he went to jail for. Karinga set him up. See, but he was a political prisoner. You had Malcolm X, white America hated him, he was talking some revolutionary stuff. You had Stokely Carmichael, who was straight up and down there until he started going off in this crazy complex explanation that some peasant in the backwoods area of Africa was supposed to comprehend as complex as it was in order to get free, which wasn't going to work, but it was what it was. You had Huey P. Newton. There was an arguable political basis for that. Eldridge Cleaver, you had, let's see, Angela Davis, who was a personal friend of mine. You had all of this stuff going on. So you had some political prisoners. What these folks, who's a political prisoner in jail right now?
You know what? H.Rap Brown, he's back. They got him in jail for some questionable charges. Now, he got into a shootout supposedly with some sheriff deputies in Atlanta.
Yeah, they wanted a scalp on there.
Yeah, it's like a little questionable how it went down.
But his brother had balls, and he ain't selling dope to any kids.
He was cleaning up the neighborhood. They were controlling the neighborhood. They made it into a community.
Exactly. See, now that's a political prisoner. But how many of those do you have in jail now?
Oh, man, that's a good question. I mean,
man, I was just moving some grams, man. See, they trying to jack up a brother just when he starts getting financially on his feet. Goddamn, that's poison, fool.
Yeah, well.
Dope ain't never hurt nobody. You tell this to folks that got a crack in their family.
But what dope did do, what this drug thing done, has removed that type of black male leadership from existing right now in this period. From the 60s. That bold black male hetero leadership is missing.